the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Welton, joined by Sergeant Welton. Clint, how are you?
I'm good.
I have a friend that I talk to nearly every single day, and he's a retired DEA agent. And something that I noticed is nearly every single conversation that we have, he is recounting stories from his career. And we talk about this a lot, where it's very important to make sure that you have other things going on in your world besides just what you do for your work. And the main reason for that is because one day all of that is going to end. And it also got me thinking about how for a lot of people, their job actually becomes a sort of religion for them.
Yeah, I could really see how, like, going down the rabbit hole and being really enthralled in your career and your job, no matter what you're doing, but especially in the field of law enforcement or for first responders in general, you can really have that this is who you identify as. And if you start living your life based off of that, like, it's a job. And I think that's the hardest thing for people to really understand, like, the difference between your career and your job compared to your actual life and your identity.
Yeah, and something I'm seeing is that it usually shows up subtly. Like, it doesn't happen right away. And this does not apply to everybody. But what I'm also noticing is, because I talk to law enforcement officers every single day. And typically the ones that are nearing the end of their career, where they know that they're about to retire, I'm noticing that religion in like a Christian sense is becoming much more of an element in their lives. And, I'm talking like hardcore involvement. This could be like details working at a church, or I know somebody who, there's a special program where they pass out Bibles. It's the same program that places Bibles inside of hotels. And, that was a little shocking to me to become involved in something like that, because I wouldn't have even considered that to be a thing. And there are some signs where your job might start to become your identity that you just might want to watch out for. And I see this a lot too in the medical field. I worked for a doctor who thought she was a god, and to this day she still believes that. And it's incorrect, it's wrong. And when that is no longer your day-to-day, then it's also really tragic to see how lonely somebody can become. And one of the indicators that I see is when rest feels totally wrong. Like, you won't even allow yourself the permission to be able to rest.
Yeah, and I see it regularly with some of my partners and people who they're at work all the time. They're constantly working. When they're not at work, they're posting on social media about work. And it's like this dynamic of, this is what they do, this is who they identify as, instead of having that balance of their home life and their work life.
When you're so all consumed with work, something else that happens is that you're no longer nurturing any of those spiritual or even personal rituals that you used to have. And I think that your belief system can actually be replaced by your mission and your command.
Yeah, being able to differentiate between the two. And that's why I think you see, people as they're getting to retirement age, they're reaching for something because they almost have a subconscious fear of that retirement and losing that identity. And that's why they delve so deeply into religion or to that new group that they can kind of latch onto.
I also see this slow erosion of faith or purpose outside of the uniform, and also this culture of invincibility and self-reliance. And I think too that trauma can often distance you from your higher power if you're not addressing things correctly.
Yeah, you want to really look at, I think that's that stigma that we've all had for so many years, being able to approach these traumas that we are exposed to on a regular basis and address them when they occur, after they occur, and not sitting on them and holding on to them and compartmentalizing them to just shove them down and find other outlets.
There's a big danger that exists in having this sort of one-dimensional purpose, and the biggest one is the collapse that follows during retirement or injury. I can't tell you how many people I've seen that they're so lost because they didn't have that foundation that was built before and during, and most importantly, to be able to land on after their career.
Yeah, and you want to set that up early on because it goes with every habit and everything that you are like dealing with in life. It's if you're all in your career, your specific duties, whatever you're doing, then you're not going to be able to break away from it. And that's why, growing up through my department, I've seen these retirees, they're at the station 2 to 3 times a week, and they're so all involved, and they're wanting to be in that environment still because they don't have anything outside of it.
Something really interesting too with the example of the friend that I shared is that he is having a very difficult time being able to reintroduce these sort of practices that, would have helped him along the way, but that would definitely help him now. And something as simple as incorporating, fitness into his day to day. I think it's been about 9 or 10 months now where he's told me that he's going to be joining a gym, and he's a senior, and so I gave him the Medicare information for him to be able to do it without having to pay anything. And it's I don't want to use the word excuse because he doesn't have that element of focus, and he always reverts back to like the storytelling or having a difficult time being able to sleep because of all of the nightmares that he's having. And mind you, he's seeing a therapist. He's also in group counseling and things like that. But it seems to me that had he had these practices along the way throughout his career, he wouldn't be struggling in the way that he is now that he's retired. And he's still living back in the realm of working days. And I think it's really sad to not give yourself that permission of retirement.
Yeah, I think you get those, and I don't know if it would be dopamine hits, but when you're sharing those stories, you're sharing your war stories, like it gives you that, when people are hearing those stories anew, then you're like reinforcing like, oh, look what I've done. And you're getting a positive reaction from people, but because you don't know how to not share those stories and actually let people get to know the real you.
I think that a lot of it has to do with trying to find your place after retirement. And that's all the more reason why it's so important, like no matter how old you are right now, to make sure that you have something that you're involving yourself in that has nothing to do with what you do for work. Because I see it's a pattern that is on repeat when somebody hasn't structured things in the appropriate way to where once they do retire, they can actually clock out for good.
Yeah, and and this is one thing I'm actually dealing with one of my employees or one of my workers, that when he's off work, he's literally working from his phone, looking at social media on different like gangsters accounts and drug dealers and all that stuff, trying to develop casework on the back end. Because he's so enthralled in his career, in his job, what he's doing, he doesn't do anything else. And that's where you want to set yourself up to where, okay, I'm home now, and let's find something outside of my normal day-to-day that I can do to get outside of that mindset.
Something that I really like seeing is when somebody does have that element of a spiritual anchor. And mind you, I don't like it when they go too far, right? And an example of that is I recently in our Police, Fire, Military, and Families Facebook group had an officer who commented something along the lines of, well, what have you done today in order to spread the word of Jesus, right? Like calling somebody out. And I understand the sentiment, right? But the proper way would have been something along the lines of, I did this because of that, and not necessarily trying to challenge. So it was inappropriate, like the threat, it didn't make any sense to do that. And so I think a lot of people are off put by those types of interactions. And I do, on the other hand, love seeing it when I'll see officers like before a shift, for example, where they'll gather and then they'll pray together. Or if something has happened during their shift and their initial response is to, pray about it or to pause and have that moment to connect with your higher power instead of the whole like I'm tough and I got this and I'm fine and blah blah blah.
Yeah, I think it's important to find that balance with anything in life. It's to have that balance and not be so committed to one specific thing to where you're giving your all the time for, because ultimately you're just using that as almost as a pawn to alleviate some other issue that may be going on.
Yeah, it's like a Band-Aid, I think.
Exactly.
I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below, and as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.